welcome to the Global Fintech Fest 2021 podcast series brought to you by IAMAI and India Fintech Diaries. And today we have two very special guests from Invest India and Startup India. Shruti Chandra, Senior AVP and Sector Head BFSI, and Aastha Grover, AVP and Head Startup India. Invest India is the national investment promotion and facilitation agency promoted by the Government of India. Invest India is also the execution agency for the Government of India Startup Initiative. Our first guest, Shruti, heads the banking and financial services and retail e-commerce teams at Invest India, where she's responsible for devising and executing investment strategy for all investors in these sectors. She's particularly focused on e-commerce, retail and fintech policy advocacy, and comes with extensive domestic and international strategic management expertise. Our second guest, Aastha, heads the Startup India team at Invest India. Startup India is a flagship initiative of the Government of India launched by the Honorable Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi in January of 2016. Under her leadership, Startup India has worked towards recognizing 45,000 plus startups, resolved over 150,000 queries, and created India's largest virtual incubator with over 450,000 users. We talked today with Shruti and Aastha on how India is fast becoming one of the biggest fintech investment destinations in the world and the key drivers behind this.
Hello and welcome to India Fintech Diaries. I'm your co-host Hemant. In today's episode, we want to talk about fintech investments in India. What makes India attractive as an investment destination and what are the key trends shaping the future? India is amongst the fastest growing fintech markets in the world and is ranked the highest globally in the fintech adoption rate along with China. Every few weeks, it is creating a new fintech unicorn and there are many on IPO route. What makes India such an attractive investment destination? What sectors are likely to grow and attract more investments? Well, to delve deeper into this topic, I am joined by some fantastic guests today. First up, we have Shruti Chandra, Senior AVP and Head BFSI Invest India. Welcome to the show, Shruti. How are you doing today?
I'm very good, Hemant and Elroy. Thank you so much for having us here today.
Thank you for joining us today, Shruti. It's a pleasure to have you on the show. We are also joined today by Aastha Grover, AVP and Head of Startup India. Welcome to the show, Aastha, and hope you're doing great today as well.
Absolutely well. Thank you, Elroy and Hemant, for having us over this session.
So, Shruti and Aastha, let's begin with a quick introduction to your respective organizations. What's the role that Invest India and Startup India play?
So good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be a part of the India Fintech Diaries. Invest India, our organization, is the National Investment Promotion and Facilitation Agency of the Government of India, which falls under the Ministry of Commerce and Industry and acts as the first point of reference for investors looking to enter or expand in India. Invest India is a non-for-profit entity and all our services are completely pro bono. It's fully funded by Government of India and we were originally set up in 2009. Invest India has four key arms that I wanted to quickly cover today. So the first arm is the Investor Facilitation and Promotion arm, which acts as a single point of contact for any investor, globally or locally, to help them while throughout their various investment life cycle. We work with you, helping you with establishing in India, operate while you operate in India as well as while you expand in India. The vision is to create a one-stop facilitation destination for investors at all stages of their investment process. And how we work with you is to help you get government approvals, show you market opportunity, help with government stakeholders, as well as resolve any issues, whether it's an operational issue or a regulatory issue, so that you can expand in India and there is ease of doing business. The second arm that we have at Invest India is where we are the execution arm for the PM Science and Technology Initiative, which is under the Principal Scientific Advisor to the Prime Minister. And some of the initiatives that we have is Waste to Wealth, which is picking up sentinel sites across the country to set up proof of concept projects and bringing in best technology in the world. Another mission mode that we have under Invest India as a part of this is the Agni initiative, which is accelerating growth of new India's innovations, which is taking innovations both within the public sector and private sector and fast tracking them towards commercialization. And there is a large, robust activity happening there, which is also focused on fintech. The third arm is the PM's Project Monitoring Group. So the PMG group is an institutional mechanism for expediting and resolving any issues and regulatory bottlenecks in projects with an investment upwards of 500 crores in India. And the last one, of course, is the Startup India initiative, which I'll request my colleague Aastha to introduce.
I'll go next on the Startup India brief. So, I head the Startup India initiative under Invest India. Startup India, as some of you may already know, is the flagship initiative of the Government of India to catalyze startup culture and build a strong and inclusive ecosystem for innovation and entrepreneurship in the country. The startup movement was ignited by the Honorable Prime Minister himself in Jan 2016, and it has stirred the entrepreneurial spirit across the country. I have been fortunate enough to be a founding member of this team. Over the past 5 years, I've seen the ecosystem to become the third largest startup ecosystem in the world when we talk about the number of startups or the number of unicorns. It is also the second largest ecosystem when it comes to receiving VC funding, highest ever in the APAC region. And it is the largest ecosystem growing in terms of the number of startups that we add every hour. Every hour, there are 4 startups that are formally born into this ecosystem. Now, the Startup India hub that is housed under Invest India is the one stop shop for the entire ecosystem. And how we have enabled the growth of this ecosystem is through a four-pronged approach. One, we believe that a startup must focus on its core job of doing business. So we enable ease of doing business by looking at regulatory compliances, looking at disruptive sector policies for startups where the traditional industries were not coming up. So you talk about fintech, which is a great example. You talk about e-pharmacy, drones, electric vehicles, and the likes. We try and carve out sections for startups so that a level playing field is provided to them. And third, we work with states. When we started, there were only 4 states with policies, but today we have more than 30 states with startup policy, and our team has worked with each of them. The second pillar of our work is unlocking market access, both at the domestic, government, and also at the international level. The third pillar that we focus on is providing funding support. So there is a 10,000 crore fund of funds managed by SIDBI for us. And recently, we have also come up with a seed fund scheme for startups. The fourth pillar that we work on is building the largest virtual incubator, which is the Startup India website, which has more than 5 lakh users. What this portal now does is enable information discovery, helps you connect with mentors, investors, and incubators around, and enables you to participate in a host of programs hosted by various stakeholders.
Shruti, in the last 4 years, we've seen over $10 billion invested in fintech in India. And just in this year, we've seen some amazing deals that have happened in the fintech space. And all this investment has actually come with a stupendous ROI of over 29%. So, what are some of the key features that make India such an attractive destination for investments in fintech?
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. India's fintech revolution has been unique, and innovation in the financial services has been one of the main catalysts, which is fueling the growth of various facets of the Indian economy today. India today is transitioning into a dynamic ecosystem, offering fintech startups a platform to grow into $1 billion unicorns. And across segments, we're seeing amazing, unprecedented growth. India today is the third largest fintech markets in the world with the highest fintech adoption rate of 87% against the global average, which is 64% in
Right.
2019. And this continues to grow, and India today has become one of the top investment destinations. In fact, recently, India has crossed China as Asia's top financial technology markets. Just to put this into perspective, 4 of the top 10 fintech investment deals in the APAC in 2021 have been from India. So, there's a lot of interest in India that we're seeing. And this is primarily being driven by, the excellent startup ecosystem that we have. Today, India has about 2,100 fintech startups. But what's very interesting is that 67% of them have just been set up in the last 5 years alone. When you look at the valuation of the fintech ecosystem in India today, it's approximately $60 billion. And this has established us as a large, vibrant fintech ecosystem. But what's very important is that this industry is at an inflection point. It's at the bottom of the hockey stick where, now the growth will be exponential. According to a BCG report, in fact, the industry is at the point of significant value creation, where valuation is expected to reach approximately $150 to $160 billion by 2025, resulting in a $100 billion value creation opportunity. And fintechs have also been at the forefront of the startup ecosystem, as I mentioned. They're expanding into other financial segments beyond their core initial offering to drive monetization and meet customer requirements, which with the ultimate vision of helping improve the service delivery and contributing to digital financial inclusion. So, the strength of our fintech ecosystem is also evident from the fintech diversity that we're seeing. While payments and alternative finance segments have constituted to more than 90% of India's investment flows in 2015, we're also seeing a lot of distribution amongst the investments across the other subsegments, be it SaaS, be it wealth tech, or be it insurtech. In fact, India is the second largest insurtech market in the APAC region already. And we have more than 100 insurtech startups in India today with, so much more interest growing. Another segment that we're seeing a lot of interest is in the private wealth market as well. And India is expected to become the fourth largest private wealth market globally by 2028. But lastly, what's very important here to also note is that it's also the success of these startups and the fintech ecosystem that we're seeing. Fintech companies have grown at a staggering 13x to 70x over the last 2 years alone, and the aggregated revenue of the top 10 fintech companies alone has gone up from USD 20 million to approximately 70 million in the period of 2018 to 2020. So this is truly unprecedented. If I was to talk about what's driving this growth, to my mind, there are some key factors that stand out. So the first one would be the large addressable demand market that we have.
Right.
India's population size and digital behavior patterns are one of the key drivers of the fintech success that we're seeing today. India has a huge consumer market. It is driven by a young population, which comprises of 65% below the age of 35 years, which is ready to use these fintech offerings to their fullest potential. There are around 71 million kids aged 5 to 11 years old who go online and are using these devices as well as fintech offerings for their family members. We're seeing a huge middle class expansion. By 2030, India will add approximately 140 million middle income and 21 million high income households. So this is leading to a huge emerging middle class and rising disposable incomes. India is now increasingly online, and Indian consumers have access to technology to address their financial requirements. And two prime markers of this increasing digitization are smartphone usage and internet consumption. India is the second largest, it has the second highest number of smartphone users globally. As of 2020, India has approximately 550 to 600 million smartphone users. And this is, 60% higher than what it was in 2016. It's also the second largest internet user market. We have approximately 795 million internet users as of December 2020. And the number of internet users in India has risen sharply over the last 4 years, which is primarily driven by data tariffs as well as the huge thrust that the government has put on digitization. And what digitization has done is that it has brought in inclusion and access. So, when we talk about financial inclusion, digitization is, that key area that is really driving. So, to put this into perspective for you, the internet usage in rural India has surpassed the urban areas for the first time in May 2020, which is, highlighting also the opportunity that this segment presents. And by 2025, there are reports that say that internet usage in rural India will surpass even that of the urban area. So that's the first element, which is, the demand story and the consumer story.
Right.
And the second factor that's leading to this growth is the presence of a significant untapped value pools. There are huge, large white spaces in the financial services, and this has played a key success factor, when we look at the fintech growth story. For example, digital lending solutions can help bridge the 300 billion gap in credit supplies for MSMEs. So there are huge, there's a lot of potential for startups to experiment with new business models to address these opportunities. The third factor is the big shift initiatives. So India's world-leading digital infrastructure, whether it's Aadhaar, UPI, GST, which is creating an enabling regulatory environment to help power India's fintech innovation. When we talk about India's public digital infrastructure, India's stack has been the wind behind India's fintech ecosystem. India today is one of the most open economies when we look at allowing private sector to play a role in India's economy. And today, across financial services, it is one of the most open sectors where 100% FDI is allowed in almost every category. And recently, in fact, India also opened up the insurance intermediaries 100%, and also for insurance providers to 74%. So that has enabled India to become more open, to promote innovation and increase private sector participation in these sectors. And the fourth and important factor that I would like to highlight is also the vibrant venture capitalist and angel investment scene that we have. This year, in 2021, despite the pandemic, 75 new Indian fintechs started their journey, and 15 of them raised funds, as well as the Indian fintechs, which closed 157 deals this year. So there is a huge interest, when we look at fintechs, but also this is being driven by the excellent investments companies are taking that faith in and taking that leap when we look at the startups. And the last important pillar that I would like to highlight is also the strong technology talent pool that we have in India. India's strong STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics orientation, world class education institutes, and competitive human resources are all enabling a very talented pool that the fintechs can rely on. So I think these are the various facets that are all coming together and really working well. And like I said, we're at that inflection point. So the story has just begun.
That is pretty interesting, Shruti, the overall growth story that we've seen in India and some of the key driving factors behind it. And I think the another very important cog in this entire wheel is the regulatory environment and the government policy towards fintechs. So in India, the regulators have actually been fairly open and permissive to allow a number of new fintech models to emerge, like you mentioned, like digital lending, neo banking that's now coming up, and certain other areas. So, Shruti, can you also share some insights on how a regulatory and policy landscape in India is making India more attractive to both start a fintech as well as grow that fintech?
Thanks. So the Indian government has facilitated the fintech industry with a slew of structural reforms, which are really lending wings to this ecosystem. The turning point for payments in India was in 2016. First, when the Indian government introduced a law to push for demonetization, which drove adoption of digital payments by and really promoted the digital ecosystem, and this enabled the country to leapfrog the adoption of online payments, specifically the use of wallets. Some
Right.
of the other noteworthy initiatives has been the Jan Dhan Yojana, which is the world's largest financial inclusion initiative, which has helped in new bank account enrollments of over 400 million beneficiaries for direct benefit transfer and accessibility to a host of financial service applications. The other important initiative is, of course, the India Stack. The India Stack has been the driving force behind the accelerated evolution of fintechs. It's the most ambitious societal initiative globally, aimed at putting up a public digital infrastructure based on open APIs to promote public and private digital initiatives. And it is based on three key layers, which is identity, payments, and digital empowerment. So, from an identity perspective, we have the Aadhaar initiative, which has created a unique identification for every individual in India. Just to give you a perspective of this, in 2008, 1 in 5 in India had an identity. Today, more than 1 billion people have a unique identification number, which has been created under this unique biometric identification system that we have. The government has also enabled Aadhaar payment systems, which allows people to carry out financial transactions on a micro ATM by furnishing just their Aadhaar number, as well as other such initiatives. When we look at KYC and customer onboarding, we have various initiatives which the government has launched, which is a video-based customer identification
Right.
processes, digital KYC, as well as digitally signed documents, which has created various safeguards for fintech solution providers and customers to leverage technology-enabled solutions in the sector. We have also created a central registry, which is reducing the hassle of ongoing multiple KYCs. When we look at the payment ecosystem, we have the unified payment interface. The government has also built supporting structures of scalable payment platforms such as UPI, which is one of the most advanced public payment system in the world to revolutionize digital payments in India. We also have the license of payment banks. The setting up of payment banks in India has further helped in enhancing the financial inclusion drive in the country by expanding the access to payment and remittances services. Currently, 6 payment banks are operating in India. And recently, the RBI has announced an increase in the maximum end of day balance for payment banks up to 2 lakhs. We also have the National Automated Clearinghouse System, which has been successfully used for making bulk transactions with INR 17 trillion worth of technologies in just the last fiscal year. Some of the other noteworthy initiatives is that the RBI has also announced a Payment Infrastructure Development Fund scheme to subsidize deployment of payment acceptance infrastructure in Tier 3 to Tier 6 cities. The initiative envisages to create new touch points every year for digital payments, which will really boost the financial ecosystem that we see. Some of the other initiatives is recognition of peer-to-peer lenders on non-banking financial companies. The central bank is taking cognizance of emergence of lending channels and created a regulatory framework around P2P lending, which will really boost the payment ecosystem. We also have, other ministries also really taking up and promoting financial inclusion. So, for example, the MSME ministry has taken multiple measures towards faster registration and resolution framework for MSMEs through digital initiatives such as the UAM, the Udyog Aadhaar memorandum, and the Udyam platform for faster registration of MSMEs. So, in any country, when you really want to boost financial inclusion, you cannot ignore the MSME segment, and this is a key initiative that the MSME segment has launched. SEBI has also paved the way for fintechs to enter the mutual fund business by waiving the profitability requirement. Further, SEBI has also proposed a common mutual fund transaction platform, and this platform would be a one-stop shop for financial and non-financial mutual fund transactions. When we look at insurance, IRDAI has also taken various initiatives towards boosting the insurance penetration, such as permitting insurers to conduct video-based KYC, launching standardized insurance products, and allowing insurers to offer rewards for low-risk behavior. The recent General Insurance Amendment Bill passed by the Parliament also aims to promote greater private participation in the public sector insurers, raise the level of insurance penetration and thereby social protection, and also contribute to faster growth of the Indian economy. Government institutions such as Health Ministry and Niti Aayog are also supporting the transformation of the insurance industry through the National Digital Health Mission (NDHM) and the Digital Information Security in Healthcare Act (DISHA) and the National Health Stack, which is aimed at effecting an integrated digital health infrastructure. The RBI has also recently announced the formation of a composite fintech inclusion index, which will capture, the extent of financial inclusion in the country, and this index will also capture details of banking, investment, and insurance to understand, where we are and also how we can further boost this. From a state's perspective as well, it's also equally important that the states are also recognizing
Right.
how important the fintech ecosystem is. For example, Maharashtra has been one of the first states to announce its fintech policy, a dedicated fintech policy in 2018, and they've also established the Mumbai Fintech Hub, which is a dedicated hub at supporting the fintechs in that state. Telangana has also set up an innovation hub, T Hub, which is aimed to empower and enable its innovation ecosystem. Karnataka is also coming out with the Karnataka Digital Economy Mission. Last but not the least, we also have the GIFT IFC announced in the last budget announcement of the Union Finance Minister, where a global world-class fintech hub will be set up, the IFC, and the GIFT City is also, in fact, collaborating with other global institutes to set up, their own fintech hubs and innovation centers. From a demand side as well, it's equally noteworthy to mention that the government is also taking a huge initiative when it comes to financial literacy. For example, the government has set up the National Center for Financial Education, which is NCFE, and the implementation of the Center for Financial Literacy project of the RBI, which are two recent initiatives towards improving financial literacy in India. The scaling up of the Center for Financial Literacy project across the country at the block level by 2024 is expected to enhance the effectiveness of community led participatory approaches for greater financial inclusion. The government has also announced recently the National Strategy for Financial Education 2020 to 2025, which is integrating financial literacy content in the curriculum for school children as well. There are various initiatives, and I think I could talk a lot about what the government is doing. But essentially, the government is providing that access as well as promoting financial literacy, because both of them are equally important when, if you want to promote the fintech ecosystem.
Understood, Shruti. Astha, Shruti spoke at length about the different regulatory and policy initiatives that are being taken to support fintech. But if you look at it at the base of it, you actually need to also have the right policy initiatives in place to support both a creation of the startup, running of the startup, and also enabling investments to flow into the startup, both local investments and global investments. So it would be interesting to understand the different policy initiatives taken by the government purely to serve startup in general.
Thank you, Hemant. And Shruti, a very, very detailed perspective about the government initiatives. Hemant, before I jump into the investment landscape, right, let me help you understand on why the investments have happened in the quantum that we envisioned them to happen. So, you mentioned that about $10 billion have been of investment has happened into the fintech landscape in the last 5 years. If you look at just this year, from Jan to August, about 50% of the investment that happened in the past 5 years has already happened into the ecosystem. That speaks volumes about, how this ecosystem is growing and how startups have impacted this landscape. I believe, what has actually led to this landscape is because fintech startups have been at the core of driving a major consumer trend and change. And let me rewind a little and share some examples, and let me make you remind of the times when we had our dad's friend or an LIC agent that helped us take insurance. When we went to the local market to purchase anything, what we got in return as a part of the balance payment was Vicks or Halls or those toffees, just because they did not had any other change to give us. When we had to physically wait in queues at banks, especially if you went around before or after the lunch hours to open a bank account, and opening of a bank account was not easy. You always wanted some reference and some connect at the bank to enable this to happen. When I use when my father used to make stockbroking account managed by a third person, and investments was done merely on hearsay. Fast forward to now, what has changed in the ecosystem so much? Everything, right from payment processing to these e-commerce transactions to purchasing insurance to trading on stock markets, from opening bank accounts to applying for personal loans. At the heart of everything, at the heart of these core transactions that happen at a click of a button right now, is all this has been enabled by startups today and not any Fortune 500 company. Now, if startups in the past 10 to 12 years are capable of bringing about such huge consumer trends, which all of us are living and breathing day in and day out, it is just obvious that money will flow where trends are flowing. So if you look at the investments, yes, about almost 50% of what happened in the last 5 years has already been reaped into this ecosystem at present, making it the second highest amount ever in this ecosystem. There has been a 5.8x increase in capital inflow across 160 deals. If you look at the sectoral comparison, right, within the fintech landscape, which is the subsector that is driving this, of course, it is digital payments, which remained the hottest area of investment with over half of the total investments going into this landscape, followed by the other subsectors, including lending tech and insurtech. We had startups like Pine Lab, Bharat Pay, Cred that amassed corpus amount of funding, boosting this total amount of funding in the payment sector. But what was also interesting to note is that now the mature fintech and fintechs, they are embracing more towards M&A, one, to grow geographically and add new forms of value to the consumer. Second, because of all the increasing attention from the government and regulator, both at the center and state level, like Shruti mentioned, um, fintechs are now evolving on what needs to be done to support these changing. So what we are seeing is not just the IPO, talk about Paytm, MobiKwik, Policy Bazaar eyeing their IPO, to betting on the favorable market dynamics at present and the abundance of liquidity into the ecosystem, to big tech companies wanting to become and embracing one-stop platform for everything that they do around fintech. So from individual to banking and from insurance to wealth management, they want to offer the entire landscape of services under one ambit. And what is even more interesting, right, when we talk about unicorns in the ecosystem, let me throw a very, very interesting stat. While it took us 7 years to hit the first 9 unicorns, we have multiplied this number of unicorns not just by double or triple, but literally by 6 times and in half the time. So today we are about 63 unicorns with a combined valuation of more than $200 billion. And about one third of the unicorns registered in 2021 were from the fintech sector. Having said a lot, I think there are more than 14 unicorns in this sector with a combined valuation of about $44 billion. And majority of them are coming from Bangalore, followed by Delhi NCR, Mumbai, Chennai, and Hyderabad. At the core of this, what we did at the Startup India to enable this all was, like I mentioned before, it is really about enabling startups to start up, and not, it is not easy to leave your high paying jobs to start up. That entire mindset change was brought about over the past few years, that enabled companies, or that gave courage to young minds, that it is okay to start up, it is okay to fail. And adding to the growth in the number of unicorns who are now our poster boys, I think it has given courage to a lot of people to start on their own. Adding 4 startups every hour is not easy, but having that courage to that, you can go to your parent and say, I want to start on my own, I want to be a job creator rather than a job seeker, is what the change has led to. At the heart of all this is the Startup India mission, which has enabled easy regulatory reform. So more than 48 reforms have been made conducive for the startups over these last years. The state policies, like Shruti mentioned, more than 30 states and union territories have a dedicated startup policy right now, and some of them have a dedicated fintech policy also. This was enabled through the state ranking framework, driving cooperative federalism among the states to support startups. We enabled funding for this ecosystem. So, from the fund of funds for startup, more than 5,000 crore has been given to about 480 startups through 53 VCs. And the beauty of this fund is that from the 5,000 crore which the government has committed, 36,000 crore of capital has been mobilized from the ecosystem, creating a 7x effect. So if you look at the role of the government, it is more of a, it is more to mobilize this pool of capital, more to have players like pension and insurance fund invest in fund of funds, which never happened before. So with game changing reforms in this year itself, we've allowed insurance funds to invest in AI structure. We had informed, we have simplified pension funds to invest their surplus corpus in startups. So I think a bunch of these efforts to simplify, to enable access to information, to change in mindset has led to the growth in the fintech sector also.
So, Shruti, could you also cover some of the specific support that's available to fintechs in India?
Right. So, the first one that I would like to cover is the steering committee on fintech related issues. So, a dedicated steering committee on fintech has been established under the Department of Economic Affairs, with membership of key government of India stakeholders to take stock of the development of the fintech ecosystem in India and globally, and identify application areas and use cases in governance and financial services, as well as to resolve any issues that that companies are facing across the ecosystem. So this is one of the most important platforms that we have, and it has membership from both the central government as well as some of the key regulators. And Invest India is also a member of this, where we are actively trying to bring in best practices in the ecosystem, as well as resolve any policy and regulatory issues and provide support to the ecosystem where we can. The other important initiative that I would like to highlight is the joint working groups that India has with two very important countries, UK and Singapore. And how these joint working groups work is that it has membership of both the senior officials from the central government as well from both sides, which work together to improve the regulatory connect, adopt learnings and best practices, and to boost entrepreneurship and collaboration between these countries. So we've started off with UK and Singapore. The two other countries that we're right now working with, and possibly we're looking at starting another joint working group, is Japan and Philippines, which are underway. The other important aspect that I'd like to highlight are the regulatory sandboxes. So in just the last 2 years, we've Indian regulators have set up multiple sandboxes by opening up their APIs for testing transformative solutions in the form of sandboxes. RBI has a dedicated sandbox. So the first cohort of the RBI sandbox was focused on payments, which is in the testing phase as of right now, and 6 entities have been selected for this. The second cohort is focused on cross-border payments and is now open for innovations around cross-border remittances. SEBI too has set up its own sandbox, and IRDI too has also launched their sandbox to allow startups to innovate by providing a conducive ecosystem and technological infrastructure. Apart from this, the Gujarat International Finance Tech City, the GIFT City, is also collaborating with multiple universities, etc., to set up their own startup ecosystem and hub. And this will accelerate fintech innovation and provide a zone for startups to, innovate in, cross-learn, and grow. Apart from this, of course, the RBI has also newly set up a innovation hub, which is promoting innovation across the financial sector by creating an ecosystem that facilitates access to financial services and products. But most importantly, we also have a dedicated 6-member team at Invest India to help and handhold the fintech companies that we have in India, which will provide you any knowledge support that you require, as well as we work with you to resolve any issues that you have across whether whichever regulator it is or whichever state it is, to handhold you and to help resolve your issues so that you can grow. So we hope that you'll, whoever's listening, we hope you'll reach out to us at bfsi@investindia.org.in. And, the team is here to support you and work with you so that you can grow.
Understood. Understood. And Astha and Shruti, let me put you in a spot a bit. A two-part question, starting with you, Shruti. So, if you look at the next 5 years, and since you do a lot of work around investment promotion for India, which 2 or 3 sectors under fintech you see maximum amount of international capital flowing into India?
Right. So, Hemant, I think one of the most important sectors that we're seeing a lot of interest in is, of course, digital payments in India. And over the last few years, the payment landscape in India has shown some major shifts, with digital payments witnessing an exponential growth, from Indian consumers shifting from paying in line to paying online. The total volumes of digital payments have increased to approximately 14 billion in from 2017 to approximately 44 billion in 2020-2021, due to sustained efforts from the government towards digitization. And India recorded approximately 34 billion digital payments by volume in the year 2019-20. Digital payments has grown approximately 10x over the last 5 years and is clocking an annual run rate of approximately $450 billion. In 2020, when you look at the spread, digital wallets became the preferred payment method at approximately 40%, which was followed by credit cards and digital payments as the most popular payment options. And one of the key reasons why we've seen this tremendous growth is because of COVID. India was home to the highest number of real-time online transactions in 2020, which was even ahead of countries such as China and the US. Because of COVID, there's been an increasing acceptance and take up of digital payment methods. If I was to talk about my, even personally in my family, my grandmother, who was very hesitant to start, paying online or even to go on e-commerce platforms, she has started ordering online, and so that's a key trend that I can personally say that I have witnessed in my own family. And digital transactions for retail and e-commerce has increased by 260% during the second wave of the pandemic. So India's seen tremendous growth. And another thing that we've seen is what's changing this is the access that we have, but also the trust factor. So increasingly, Indian consumers are now trusting digital payment methods and platforms and using these options that they have. And contactless payment options are also now becoming increasingly the norm. Further, the usage of interoperable QR code infrastructure has led to the onboarding of 30 million merchants, which is increasing the payment infrastructure that we're seeing as well. And also, there is increasing investment, of course, that we're seeing in this sector because of the trust and the increasing take up from the consumers that we're seeing. If I was to talk primarily on some of the initiatives which is leading to behind this growth in this segment is of course RuPay. Within a short span of time, the indigenously developed RuPay debit card, which was launched in 2012, has forged alliances with major international network partners and providing global acceptance and payment solutions. And today, a total of 600 million RuPay cards have been issued, including 290 million issued in the Jandhan accounts. So these cards could be used for ATMs, for cash withdrawals, and at POSs and e-commerce for digital payments. So there's been a huge take up of this, and RuPay is now also tied up with Bahrain's fintech firm Benefit to enable acceptance of RuPay at ATMs and point of sale terminals across Bahrain. They've also launched recently in UAE, so we're seeing a huge take up of that. Another initiative is, of course, the UPI, which I mentioned earlier. And in India today, the real-time mobile-based UPI payments are truly interoperable and settled in fiat money, supporting person-to-person and person-to-merchant transactions. And we're seeing a huge scale of transactions which are happening on UPI, which has been unprecedented. So we have approximately 2.29 billion transactions, which were recorded in February 2021 alone. Which amount, just to put this into perspective, so since we started this podcast, we would have had approximately 3.1 million transactions which have happened. And from an opportunity point of view as well, there is immense headroom for further growth in this segment, given that the card and mobile payments account for only 20% of in-store transactions. And in-store transactions form almost 90% of the total retail sales. So there's immense, growth and potential that we see for this sector, as well as a lot of interest from the investment companies as well, when they're looking at this segment. So that would definitely be one of the segments that I would say, we see a huge potential.
So it's been an excellent conversation so far, Shruti and Aastha. If our audience wanted to get in touch with you to learn more about Invest India and Startup India, what's the best way to do this?
Thank you. So, to anyone who's listening to us, you can reach us through any digital medium. You can email us your query or your specific question at dipp-startups@nic.in. You could also just pick up the phone and call us at 1800115565. Or we are there on any of the social media handles. So reach out to us at Twitter, LinkedIn, or through Facebook, and we'll be there to guide you further.
Excellent. We'll add those details in the show notes. Thanks for joining us on the show, Shruti and Aastha. It was great having you on the show.
Thank you so much, Elroy. Thank you, Hemant. And thank you, Shruti. It was a pleasure to be a part of this show and share some light.
Thank you so much, Hemant and Elroy, for inviting us. And thank you, Aastha, again.
That's it from India Fintech Diaries this week. Thank you for joining us for this Global Fintech Fest 2021 podcast series brought to you by IAMAI and India Fintech Diaries. If you haven't yet registered for the Global Fintech Festival, please go to globalfintechfest.com and register. We promise it's going to be an exciting and interesting event that covers all things that are Indian fintech and more. Until next time, stay safe.